at the time, Japan was the rich country. So I learned Japanese, lived in Japan, learned how to speak language, came back, and that fell in a heap. And I quite often joke with my family that, I provide the touch of death in various industries. A lot of my music experience has been sort of like operating at a high level, and quite often it might just be me being oversensitive, but quite often feeling like people are like, he'll do for the moment. A lot of us just get our information from music, books, movies, and they're the fucking worst, man. Like they, love conquers all. No, it fucking doesn't.
Without revealing too many details, does any of the craziness that you're experiencing work-wise, does that come downstream from the ever-changing and dynamic geopolitical situation that we find ourselves in?
No, unfortunately, that just ruins my day-to-day life outside of work. No, I was going to say, look, I work in the world of mainframe infrastructure, and things tend to go wonky over like Easter and Christmas. Just I won't bore everyone with it. Like, there's nothing I hate more than anyone going, tell me about your job. And I'm like, no, it's fucking boring. But that we've got industrial action happening at the moment, which is unrelated to America deciding to attempt to bomb Iran back into the Stone Age. So, we haven't slowed down that action really for anything, but I've probably just pushed the limits of what I'm able to say about it on air.
Yeah, no, it is always funny to me. Like, I think of everyone I speak to, I mean, there's folks that I have on the podcast that have, professional careers and stuff outside of work, but like I always find the most affinity with you, because I think even though we don't do the same sort of thing, what we do as day jobs is so vastly removed from music, from anything that goes on this podcast, from anything you guys record. I think if anyone ever knew any details about what I do day to day, I think they'd be fucking astonished. I mean, work like my company knows about the podcast and they don't mind it at all. Obviously I wouldn't say they would be censorious. I don't think they listen, but I also can't be a fucking idiot. So I need to be mindful of how I present, how and what I present on the show. But
I'm very much walking a similar line myself, particularly at the moment where I'm being put forward for another workload that requires all manner of government clearances.
Oh, okay.
And again, that's the limit of what I can say for that. But like, my terror is that they'll sift through every interview I've ever done, and like I'll be pulled into the disclosure room to fess up to everything I've said on air, and I have to reveal to them, no, that was all lies. I'm a poser, really. I'm straight edge. I play under 200 BPM.
Well, what they're going to do is they're going to say, "Sir, tell us a little bit about this song, Skull Battering." Interesting lyrics on that one.
I sometimes wake up sort of like in a dead sweat that like I'll be asked to explain what I was trying to get at with Dog Knotted.
What you were trying to get at with some of the Antichrist Imperium lyrics.
I can tell anyone exactly what I was trying to get at with those lyrics. I was just basically trying to pick up the relay baton from Dave Gray and sort of like jog with it a bit.
Yeah, dude, it's I have to say, I don't know whether you sense it or whether you notice it on, I mean, certainly the people that listen to this podcast, the Antichrist Imperium is an enduring interest. Like you guys have, perhaps not millions of fans, but certainly a very dedicated group of people for whom, and I include myself in this, that trilogy, if it were to remain a trilogy, that I think in some ways I'd understand, because I know the constraints that you guys are under when making any music with Antichrist Imperium. But if it stayed a trilogy, I think that would be the most perfect trilogy in extreme metal history. And I know I'm not alone in my opinion there.
Cheers. I think particularly with number 3, there's all sorts of problems around the release of that. Like, I think the record label got hacked by Russian hackers, and so was unable to run the web store. So just in time for the release, no one was able to really get it. And I don't think they were able to get it for about another 9 months or something crazy like that. So people knew about it through your podcast, and they'd heard a little bit online, but something like that happens and you don't get that, real clear punch through on the release, it tends to turn into something that people then pick up over quite a few years. And if, fortunately or unfortunately, that album's kind of turned into one of those. Yeah.
Well, I shall do my part to continue contributing to its cult status. I mean, for me, it hits as one of my favorite albums of all time from the very second that Sam sings "Lie Down Within the Symbol." When Matt had sent that to me and I heard it for the first time, I was like, "Oh my god, this is fucking incredible!"
Yeah, we go back and listen to it every now and then. One of the funny things about the amount of output that we do, and also how old we are, is you sometimes sort of like forget all the stuff that you put out. And yeah, every now and then it's kind of funny. Matt and I tend to not listen to any Antichrist Imperium for like sometimes a year or two at a time. And then we'll sort of like listen to one of the albums and be like, we're always chatting, and we'll be like, hey, I was listening to like number 2 or number 3 like just the other day. Fucking hell. That turned out all right. And it's like, what a coincidence. So have I. Yeah. And we do that little FB Messenger high five kind of thing. And but yeah, it's really funny. Like, it's probably happening a lot more these days, just forgetting about our output. And so it's always a pleasant surprise when someone's just like, yeah, I still dig it, or I'm still listening to it. It's like, which album? Oh, that one. Cool. Thank you.
Well, that's the thing. All three. I mean, I listen regularly to all three, and I on a semi-regular basis, I feature all three on the show. But I also, especially now that I've started opening the news rant to questions, I get a reasonable number of questions about Antichrist Imperium and Akakaka. The overlap there, I think, for a lot of people is like a big thing. Partly, I think, because they realize that we most likely will never get an Akakaka record in the vein of Cognizance ever again, and so Antichrist Imperium kind of filled that void, did it extremely well. But yeah, now that's all done as well. Here's a question for you: what do you make? And I haven't spoken to him about it yet, but what do you make of your man Matt joining the Amenta?
It was a little bit of a surprise. I was going to say, like, yeah, it's I want more gigs, and it's always like a little bit of a when you see both of your bandmates like on board a band that you played with. I'll be at the show. It will probably be pretty amazing. Wish I was on board for it.
Dude, I'm again. Yeah. I joked about this on Twitter. I think yesterday, and I said, 2 albums of the year alumni joining forces. That absolutely has to be the trumpet call of the apocalypse. But man, they're meant to me going all the way back to Catharsis and literally all the way down the discography, in particular Revelator. Fucking hell, what a band. What a band. Yeah. And I was going to pick Matt's brain at some point on Messenger and ask him if if the plan is for him to contribute musically to the band, because if he is, I mean, I just can't imagine what'll come out of that.
Yeah, look, if I know that band at all, that discussion hasn't happened. Yeah, again, I'm talking from the outside these days, but I suspect that they'll surprise themselves when it's time for them to do music, if it's time for them to do music again. Yeah, I was going to say, sorry, Matt is already on about 3 or 4 albums this year, and he's got some other stuff in the pipeline as well. So I'm not sure if he's like got, any more bandwidth for getting his arm twisted. I will say that like the Amenta, like, as someone who played in there briefly, like the music and the creative impulse in it is extremely different from anything else. Like Matt's a great guitarist, great musician. I'm not sure if like his style carries over to it. He's a scales guy. He's got the defect of actually being a proper musician. And a lot of what you're meant to play is, you know, again, like I shouldn't be speaking on their behalf at all, but it really strikes me as you have to unlearn how to play a lot of what you know about your instrument or about music to wrap your head around what they're doing. I know when Matt was like learning the parts for this upcoming tour, he is like, yeah, it took me a few weeks just to try and get his head around like what Eric's doing. You know, there's a lot of very non-traditional sort of chords or riffing or picking in there, and a lot of it, like, whereas Matt can sort of like clearly tabulate what he gives me for Werewolves and sort of like go finger on here, finger on there, a lot of material is kind of like, it's sort of like this, and you have to kind of aim for a sound or vibe, and you've only just got like a vague sort of idea of where on the fretboard it's supposed to be happening. So it's a real different band, that one. Like, yeah.
Well, I mean, that particularly started for them when they put out Non. I think Catharsis was kind of the closest they ever came to putting out something that was, you know, traditionally written extreme metal music. You know, with Non, all bets were off, and I think exactly what you just said there now around. I think what you were driving at, because this is what I was thinking. The way they write riffs and the way they play all of their instruments, really, it's all really about being expressive more so than being musical, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and the song very much seems to come first, above and beyond everything else. Like, whereas, you know, the curse of metal is such a guitar hero sort of genre. Like, usually, you know, the riff, the guitarist, what he does come first and like writes everything, and the band gets wrapped around that. And now the Amenta, it seems to sort of like happen, you know, very much in service of like a vision. But you know, again, I'm putting words in their mouth. Like, just grab one of those guys. I'm sure they'll tell you all about it.
Oh no, I've had them on, and I'm definitely going to have to reach out to Tim and get something sorted again to get an update on what's happening. But you know, I am a very, very long time fan. I don't think you said anything that was that I don't think either. And I'm you know, all of those things. I mean, certainly for me, I mean it in the most complimentary way. I was bummed to learn of Kane leaving, because I think his vocals brought something really special to the band, especially his cleans. But you know, life changes, time moves on. You know, if your heart isn't in it anymore, there's no point in necessarily. And I mean, I don't know what the reason was for doing it, but if your heart's not in it, then you know, there's no point in beating a dead horse.
Yeah, it's definitely not a band where I think you could fake your interest if you're a member in it. Like, if it wouldn't work.
Now, there was a massive preamble to talking about a couple of announcements that you suggested that you had on Messenger when we were talking. So, what's going on?
Well, I was going to say Berserker. Lee contacted myself and a few of the other guys the other week, asking if we'd like to do live shows, and the answer was yes. So we haven't told anyone yet, so it's out there now. We don't have any shows booked. I'll jump ahead of like everyone who's about to be like, play South America, play Damnation first, play this, play that.
When are you coming to my city?
It's like, fellas, we're in a country that might very well run out of petrol like in the next couple of months. We're going to see if we can get some Australian shows done first. They'll be in the second half of the year. Nothing is booked yet, but yeah, it'll be Luke, myself, Todd on drums, Matt on guitar, and yeah, just we're at the point at the moment of just talking to booking agents and trying to get stuff locked in. So that was my big announcement. Yeah.
Dude, that's a fucking huge announcement, because I think we spoke about that when you were on the podcast, maybe not the previous time, but certainly a time before that. And you suggested that it seemed unlikely that it was going to happen.
Yeah. Oh, look, anything with Berserker, I was 100% sure it was done and dusted. But then, was it Luke did that track, or we did that track like around Christmas last year, and that was just put together, very quickly, like within a week, and it seemed to get received well. And on top of that, I think Luke got pulled out for his first interview in decades just the other week. It was with David from Atrabilius on the Riff Worship podcast.
I know David.
Yeah, I liked his episode that he did with you. That was a good one.
Fucking tier one gentleman, that guy. I like him very much.
Yeah. And, I think most of his life, he's like post-Berserker. He's just done his best not to think about it, and nothing like, shits him more than people like going, "Where's the next album? When are you playing? Are you going to play my town?" It's just like, no. And they managed to just like, guide the conversation along and let him sort of like ramble. And I think you got to the end of it and was just like, it planted a seed in his head, I think. And then he got on to, and then I think the thing that really turned him was he went and saw Anthrax sort of hobble out on stage in their mid to late 60s and just bang out a show. Like they'd been on tour in Australia a couple of weeks ago and absolutely killing it. So I think he saw that, and any fears that we're too old for this shit dissipated. So then he did the call around. So I was the first, and I was like, I'm down. Always have been. Todd, go back a year. He was touring around the world with King Parish, supporting Pantera in stadiums everywhere. And now his diary is slightly emptier. And then there's Matt, who hasn't ever met a gig that he never wanted, didn't want to play. But he's also like, say, great, I could be in another band. Does
he just not want to have weekends anymore? Yeah, he just doesn't want to have any free weekends any longer.
Yeah, I think if anyone said to him, "Do you want to start a new band from scratch?" he'd be like, "Fuck no, I can't." But something like Berserker is like, we've played so many shows under so many conditions that the first 2 albums are like, 3 maybe, are drilled into his central nervous system. He sent through some footage when he got back home of him just like sort of playing through a couple of the songs, and he's like, I literally haven't played these for 20 years and just banged them out perfect. So he likes the idea of a big gig with little to no rehearsing.
Tell me a bit about those early Berserker days, because we've skirted around them, we've touched on them, and at the risk of endangering your ability to get government level clearance, I would love to know more about it, because like that, those seem to have been, from the conversations we've had, very formative years for both you and Matt.
Matt turned up like, once we'd already been going for a few years, and when things kind of settled down a bit, because the early days were very tumultuous, but it was also, it was very, very different. I'll explain why in a second, but like, Matt brought believe it or not, a bit of a calming influence with him when he joined for Dissimulate, the second album onwards, which is very, very much Matt. But when I joined, Luke had already been playing as DJ Berserker for a few years, working with Lenny D and Industrial Strength, like those guys. And I think he'd already been trying to put a sort of band together with guys in Melbourne and guys in Australia, but it actually burnt his way through a lot of the scene because he was just so full on. The dude's a lot. And anyway, he happened to be DJing and remixing over in Europe, and popped over to the UK, caught up with the U8 guys who had their own experiences with Industrial Strength Records and Lenny D. And they heard some of the remixes he'd done. He'd remixed, I think, Morbid Angel and Deicide, and they really loved that. And they, at the time, I think Dig was getting hardcore into like GABA, electronic music in general. I think he saw how that was taking off and was like, I want a slice of that pie. And saw Berserker as a way of sort of getting into that without sort of leaving their extreme metal or grindcore roots. So basically gave him a 5-album contract and sent him on his way back to Australia with the instructions, find some musicians, record an album. So when I met him, like I wasn't playing in any bands. I had just put a notice up in a music store saying looking for a band to play with. Inspiration for that was more my housemates trying to get me out of the house whenever I played guitar because I was so fucking annoying to their poser ears. And Luke was the first one to respond. And as I said, at that time, no one else was working with him. So sat down, I learnt the songs, like he had about 4 or 5 songs he'd already done. And then we wrote or filled out the rest, demoed them all up. He knew the strapping on lad guys in Devon, and they were like, Devon was like, I'll produce it, fly over here, get the strapping guys to play it. He did that, and it didn't work out. So he came back, and after sort of like, trying to use like the Brutal Truth guys, Dave Vincent, the Extreme Noise Terror guys, it was just like no one could really do it, at least the way that he envisioned. So he came back to me as I was the closest fit, and I was just keen, man. Like back then, it was late 90s, but back then sort of like Earache was the label. And the idea of being from a little Australian town, putting out an album on Earache Records was just like, I didn't even dare dream something like that. And at the time as well, like, and this is where I'll get into the nitty gritty sort of like kind of stuff. At the time then, just I had nothing going on. I'd finished university and lived in Japan and was speaking Japanese fluently, and wrapped all that up just in time for the Asian financial crisis to send Japan broke. So suddenly this like hard-won skill I had was useless and pointless. And I was just working as a waiter in restaurants around Melbourne. Zero future, and just getting shit on as well, because they're like, you didn't study hospitality. And it's like, motherfucker, I ran bars in Japan. It's like, just angry every day. And Berserker turned up and suddenly like had a purpose. And it was, a purpose that meant a lot more to me than working in an office somewhere or waitering in a restaurant or, speaking Japanese even. So I went for it, full on, and we burned through a lot of musicians as well. I was pretty much as much of an asshole as Luke, if not more, back in those days. Like, if anyone wasn't towing the line, they're fucking out. If we kept our identities secret, if someone like auditioned or rehearsed with us and then told everyone they were in Berserker, well, then they were out the next day. Like, we were just a bit fucking mental about it. At the same time as that, like, because it wasn't sort of like in the metal world, which I enjoy, but it's so much smaller than every other sort of like industry or scene in the world. It was still really part of like the electronic music scene. So we were trying to hook up and work with different artists and filmmakers for like across all sorts of media. I remember when some rich guys were sending a submersible down to like a World War II shipwreck that hadn't been opened yet, I think off the coast of Thailand or something. And basically there's hundreds of bodies, or at least skeletons, like left in there. And they were kind of like, do you want the footage? Do you want to do stuff with the footage? And we were just like starting to hear from all sorts of people as well, like some Mondo movie makers who are kind of like, we can provide footage for your, for what you're doing. This is like such early days. Like it was even, before some of those shock websites. It was definitely before just being able to like pop onto a dark corner of the internet and rip off some complete horrifying like stuff and set it to a film clip. So we were kind of in a lot of contact with those guys, and when we did that first US tour, and particularly when we turned into a bit of a more traditional, for us, metal band, like from Dissimulate onwards, a lot of that world closed off. We became much more successful in the metal world because we were doing what you're supposed to do, but at the same time, you know, I remember like, again, doing the first album, like Luke had to pause during it to go over and headline the Fuck Parade in Berlin, which is playing to about 100,000 people. And we spent a few days like with me just going, you know, probably sacked from another dead end dickhead waitering job in the vocal booth, just screaming my head off and like making a couple of minute long track for him just to lay on everyone. So yeah, it was really different those early days. Like it was very much the sky's the limit. And to simulate, like once we finished the world touring after that, for me, I sort of started edging out of the band, even as far as then, because I was like, if this is as good as metal goes, like, you know, there's not much of a future in here. This is hobby material. It's not you're going to be able to have a living material. It was doing things like touring with like Napalm Death, for instance, on their first US tour, like for ages, and seeing them landing in the US and they'd booked a motorhome, and you know, as quite often happens in the US, like that was just given to someone else. I think it was given a Dillinger Escape Plan, and they were like, but we've booked it, here's the contract. And it's like, well, you're in America now, little English band, what are you going to fucking do about it?
Little
they
brummies.
Had to, yeah, and it was February, it was freezing cold. They had to tour the entire States in an airport shuttle, which was the last vehicle that they were able to get, like at short notice. And I was like, this is Napalm Death, man. What the, you know, is this what we've got to look forward to? And there's just lots of cases of that. There was also, you know, for anyone like young Sam, who was idealistic about the powers of Satan. You know, we were meeting some of the more famous, noteworthy Satanists like on tour, and there's no, you know, mansions and eyed wide shut parties and people drinking like, you know, ecstasy laced blood from goblets or anything like that. It was these sad guys in sports bars drinking like, you know, pints during happy hour to try and save their pennies because they're fucking bums. And it's like, yeah, nah, this isn't my future. So that was the early Berserker days.
a couple of news rants ago, I was talking about this, and I said one thing I've observed about my generation, and I see it in the music industry, but I see it, you know, around fans, and it's not even just exclusive to the metal scene; it's all over. There's an awful lot of people that are in their mid to late 40s that are living like they are 19 years old, and I look at them and I go, do you have any idea what you are sleepwalking into? Because like the, you know, generous like what a government pension used to do for you, or for your parents, I should say, is not going to be the same what it's going to do for you if you get it at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I got serious about that.
It's fucking terrifying, mate. It's absolutely terrifying.
I'm pretty sure, like in our lifetime, we'll see. I don't think they'll get rid of the pension, but what they'll be like is they're like, pension will cover your medical treatments, your health treatments, and that's it. Anything else is on you. So I think we'll see that at some point in our lifetime. So there's a lot of things that I thought I'd see maybe when I was like doddery and old, but I'm kind of like seeing it these days, earlier and earlier. And it's, I'm 51. I'm not young, but like, I'm feeling kind of old seeing a lot of stuff at the moment.
You feeling old because you're getting annoyed by the stuff you're seeing, or are you feeling old because you're just feeling old?
Bit of both, but like it's the stuff that I'm saying. It's very much a case of a lot of the freedom and flexibility and wealth, I guess, that we took for granted. The sun's setting on that. I wish I thought otherwise, and I wish I had better news otherwise. But you know, a lot of it is predicated on cheap oil, cheap energy, freedom of movement. You know, cheap labor from countries that didn't then want to leverage it into, you know, strategic government policies. I'm being nice about that. Definitely didn't sort of spot the US, defense benefactor going kind of fascist. And so things like, the small defense amount that we spend on defense in Australia, for instance, I think it's 2% or less. That's a tiny amount for a country historically. And the fact that we've been able to spend so little has meant more money for all the fun stuff or other things. And Europe's starting to get the hang of it, but Australia definitely is far from it. But it's very much a case of you need to probably get your own self-defense force now in order. I don't think the US is going to sail around and look after us. ANZUS, I think is dead in the water. AUKUS, which is Australia, UK, US sort of like arrangement, the centerpiece of which is us spending over $40 billion on buying subs to be delivered by the late 2030s. That's a fantasy now. That money's getting flushed away, just like the $5 billion countries were paying for the Board of Peace.
Well, my view on this, and again, not to turn it into the geopolitics happy hour, but it's it's definitely not happy. But the one of the biggest reasons why everything is falling over right now, the vast majority of people that live by the headlines aren't going to pick this up, but this is in my view, this is certainly the biggest contributor. If not, if you want to make a case for it not being the biggest, you'd be hard pressed to make a case for it not being amongst the biggest. But it is the fact that for the last several years, I'd say really accelerating as of 2002, where people like you and I have to live through scarcity. We have to manage scarcity in our personal lives. Like, we just can't go out and squander money frivolously on whatever bullshit we want, because eventually that debt will catch up to you. Governments haven't done that. So even though yield, for example, on crops are 16 times more now than they were 40 years ago, food should actually be, one, more plentiful, and two, cheaper. The fact that there's so much money being pumped into the system constantly devalues the money, and so we live under this constant cloud of inflation, and it's compounding. It's just getting worse, and eventually the system, the center just can't hold. And that's at the core of what everybody is suffering through right now, is effectively, and there's no government that is, left or right, that is not guilty of this. Every single government is spending substantially more than they bring in. That they overtaxing, in many countries, overtaxing their citizens, and they just fucking blow money on bullshit. There's so much corruption. There's so much skimming off the top. It's just absolutely unreal. And the thing that is maddening to me is, then you look at the what that drives people to start supporting. I mean, here in the UK, the fact that the Green Party is starting to get like quite a significant amount of support from the populace here blows my mind. It's like, how can you be this fucking stupid?
There's desperation kind of everywhere. I see the movements as being a little bit more than that. I think it's a result of there being two philosophies like that have basically been predominant in the West since the 80s. Like the first one being trickle-down economics, which never trickled down, and then globalization with the idea that it will provide benefits to individuals in countries that were, say, losing lower skilled workloads to other territories. And again, the promise of that was never realized. I think we're on the edge of like the third philosophy, which is that technology, particularly AI, will not only unleash productivity, but there'll be benefits again to the populace. And I think this is where no one's buying the idea anymore. It's kind of like, we can't take this on hopes and dreams like we did trickle down and globalization. You need to show us like how it's going to work for everyone. And one side is sort of like going, well, universal basic income, and that's for the people that clung to those previous two philosophies for the last few decades, that is a bridge too far for them. And they're like, no, at the West's heart, we're still kind of pretty Christian, pretty Lutheran, and a large part of that is work defines you as a person. and that's ingrained to us culturally, whether or not you yourself are Christian or not. And as a result, like, you know, UBI, it's not something that they're just going to be AI. They can just like go blam and displace an industry in an instant. UBI would take like at least a decade of edging forward there in different various measures to do it. But the other problem that you also have is that the absolutely unfettered regulation over companies and corporations. So a large part of being able to redistribute to large amounts of displaced people would be taxing them efficiently. And, you know, when you got billions, you know, lobbying a government, which is what we say in the West, or bribing, which is what they say in Asia, you know, is just a tiny cost.
Paying tribute.
Yes.
That's what I say. That's what I say in the village when I go door to door saying, got a window there that might get smashed if I don't get my weekly payola.
And that's the thing I'm more concerned about. Like, you know, everyone sort of looks at the rioting and the shit going on and going, look at these little weasels, or, you know, these bloody paws, you know, like, how dare they? How could they? And I'm and the bit of me which, you know, went to private school and, you know, and has looked after myself is like, yeah. And the bit of me that thinks a bit further ahead is like, really, what have they got to lose? And going forwards, I'd be a fool to think that this is going to slow down, because we're not giving anyone any reason to, you know, where's the big light on the hill or the shining dream, or like the thing to look forward to? Where's the hope? You know, it ain't there. And if you present it, no one believes it anyway. Like, cynicism is definitely the fashion of the 2020s. So we're fucked. Yeah.
I want to get back to something that you said earlier about your kind of your personal journey. It's interesting to me, and you skirted around it, but you were a guy who, in your, you know, post Japan, in your early 20s, you know, it sounds like by your own admission you were kind of quite aimless, and now obviously you live a very different life. You know, and again, like I think you and I are quite similar in a lot of ways. In not in that regard, I was working when I was 20 years old, but but you know what I mean, just in terms of where our lives are now and kind of, you know, what we, as I mentioned before, our careers, etc. But what was the catalyst that changed things for you?
In terms of like putting me onto music, or in terms of
in terms of just kind of getting your life, I mean, for lack of a better phrase, getting your life in order.
I hate to say it, but that didn't really happen until about 10 years ago, like well into my 40s.
Oh, really?
Yeah. God, how quickly can I sum this up? I'm going to try and do this in less than a minute. Famous last words.
This is where we dig into the good stuff, mate. You know, I want to know the drugs, the pornography, the dog fighting, all sorts.
The murder, yeah.
The murder.
No, it's just when I was at high school, the idea was to be a lawyer, and the whole, around about the time that death metal hit me, was also about the time that they changed schooling in my state. We've got a very left-leaning government that overnight just changed how high school students were marked.
How did they change it? What do you mean?
It went from being something called the HSC, which the majority of marks were exam-based, to something called the VCE, the Victorian Certificate of Education, which became collaborative group projects. Now, I'm not a people person. You might be noticed. But I've got a pretty good memory. So like exams favored me. I read something once, memorize it, and then go in and ace my exam. And up until, you know, the system changed, I was a straight A student. Law was my destination. And then it changed, and it suddenly became about collaborative group projects. And that, it wasn't the majority of the mark, but it was a significant portion of it. And as a bonus, I was going to a boarding school, but I was a day student. So I'd turn up in the morning early, I'd leave late at night, but I'm not around there overnight. I'm not in a boarding house. I'm not there for weekends. So the dynamic definitely for that favored borders, because you're collaborating, like you're there all the time. You can work together. And I had a limited window on which to sort of like do that as a day boarder. So long story short, that kind of fucked me. And finishing school was already the first like speed bump in, my plans for the future. There's no way I could get into law. I scraped my way out of school. And so languages was something else, like, it's the memory helped with that. And so at the time, Japan was the rich country. So I learned Japanese, lived in Japan, learned how to speak language, came back, and that fell in a heap. And I quite often joke with my family that, I provide the touch of death in various industries. From that, I sort of like jumped I jumped to a number of professions in between, like playing with Berserker. I ended up going into web design, but I specialized in ActionScript for Flash websites. And of course, just as I started freelancing for that, HTML5 came in. So that ended that.
Jesus.
Yeah. Then I went to work. I moved to England, so I ended up working for JP Morgan Chase and got into mainframe there. And that was just in time for the GFC to happen. So, yeah. So at every step of the way, every time I try and sell out and go normal, like the world tends to sort of like just go, no, you fucking don't. And just that pole revolves and I fall off it into the water and just like have to splash my way to a new destination. So let me see. I haven't been able to, after that, I got back to Australia. I started working in mainframe for a more normal company, very quiet, very easy. And, but the problem is that, and this is something that you might relate to, and anyone else who works in an office relates to as well. Once you've done something like music, music mightn't play well, it might be pleasurable, even, but it's meaningful. It provides great meaning. And I quite often say to people, yeah, my work pays me, but in 10 or 20 years' time, no one's going to remember like the spreadsheet that you did. No one's going to remember the customer presentation that you did.
The PowerPoint deck that you drafted.
Yeah, but you will still be getting emails from people talking about how your album changed your life, or even just wanting to discuss it, to go, what was going through your head when you made that. And you're quite often reminded of like the impact that you got on other people's lives. Whereas, the modern world, the modern corporate world insulates you from that, which is why you quite often just see such banal evil done by companies. They do a great job of just like, blocking you off from any sort of like connection with the world. So that kind of led me to these days. But I really struggled through my 30s and 40s. Like, I'd moved to Adelaide. I didn't know many people here. It's a very cliquey town. And I'd gone from, living in cities or countries which are very social. Say what you will about the UK, but the people, are very open and like easy to make friends with. It's really easy to find your group, I found. And yeah, suddenly I'm in a place where just like everyone else is the world away, in a job I could just about sleep my way through. And I'd also walked away from music largely as well. What got me back on track? I moved back to Melbourne in 2016 to work for a mate's company. The purpose was help him scale his IT company. I turned up there, and unfortunately, the friend passed away within a couple of months of me returning. So I
the Mac in action again.
Yeah, like ta, dead industry. Yeah. No, that was a super shit time. And on top of that, I returned to Melbourne. Like, I'd last lived there in 2005, and suddenly I was like, oh, it's not the same city it was back then. It turned into for me, a bit of a shithole. Very uptight, fining you for like farting too loudly. You know, queues everywhere, crowds everywhere. Yeah, no, it wasn't pleasant. And then my friends and my job sort of went. And at the time, like I actually had a little bit of a breakdown. That was the first time I sort of like had anxiety issues. I went straight from there into another job where they tried to get me to create a cloud services onshore help desk to go live for the major telco here, and they gave me a month to do it, and they'd already made some completely unrealistic costings as well for how much it was going to do. And me being me, I stayed awake for a month, delivered, and then was like, all right, so when do we start interviewing people for these roles? And they're like, oh, you know, we want to see what the core volumes are like first. And I was like, well, who's manning it? And they're like, you are. And I was like, so I quit on the spot. And after that, I didn't work for months. And I had, you know, no idea what to do. I kept in touch with my old job here in Adelaide. I came back to it. That expanded and needed all sorts of workers. So I came back, and this time when I got back to Adelaide, I knew what I was getting myself into. I was grateful for it. I knew it was about the peace and quiet, but I was like, look, back in Melbourne, my future looked like, you know, being a bum musician living in a one-bedroom apartment at the age of 60, eating like dog food out of a tin, you know, to get by. Moved back to Adelaide. My timing was really good. I got into the property market here, and that's just gone gangbusters, and I've sort of gone up a few levels. But also, around about the same time that happened was the same time Matt got me involved in Werewolves, which was 2019. And that's, you know, a lot of my music experience has been sort of like operating at a high level, and quite often, it might just be me being oversensitive, but quite often feeling like people are like, he'll do for the moment, you know. We'll use him just to, you know, get this album done, or like, you know, maybe get a tour done, and until we find someone better, and then we'll get him out of the way with a bullshit excuse and slot someone else in. It's happened to me a few times. But with when Matt got me on board for Wells, it was very much like, cool. You know, this is a regular thing with some of the top performers, and it's our own band. And he'd worked with me enough by then to sort of like know what my deal is. So, and around the time a good relationship came along as well. And that kind of makes all the difference. So it was kind of like three things fell into place. But for anyone out there sort of like going, you know, is there one magical thing that turns things around, just particularly when you start hitting middle age and you're like, fuck, I really need to get my shit together. No, there's not one single simple thing, like, you know, and if there's anything from my long-winded story anyone can take from that, it's just that, you know, for all the crap luck I had with like careers and industries and whatnot while growing up, like, you know, a little bit of good luck in a couple of years just turns everything around. So that's kind of where I'm at now.
And that's the thing, you know, it's as Kenny Powers said, you just need to keep your eye on the road and keep your foot on the fucking gas. I mean, you know, when I was at my most down personally, it was Eastbound and Down. It was amongst other things, that line like really stuck with me. But I'm glad you shared that story, because interestingly, again, as I've opened up to more questions on the news rant, I get a lot of questions from guys that are, you know, in their you know, mid to late 40s, and I think a lot of us are all going through you know, similar challenges, or at least have done, come back from adversity, and some people are in the process of doing it. But a lot of folks are kind of wondering, okay, what do I do with the next, you know, 20 years, or how do I make the most of the next 20 years? I don't want to, you know, end up like a I mean, as I said, the avalanche of homeless elderly people that we're going to see when we are retired. And it's interesting hearing different perspectives of people who've gone through that. you strike me as a guy, just from the story that you've told now, that can deal with adversity, probably better than you give yourself credit for. But I was curious as to how do you process, and how do you manage through adversity, and how have you done it in times gone by?
It's funny you say that. I don't think I'm particularly good at it. Like, I tend to sort of like sulk and whimper and feel sorry for myself a bit.
Well, apologies for the interruption, but I would say you would not be here today, based on everything you've just told me now, if you weren't good at it. And that's why I said I think you are better at doing it than you give yourself credit for.
Thank you. Look, I got advice from my dad like a few years back. Pity is the killer. Self-pity is the killer. For men particularly, we're kind of notorious for topping ourselves, like when things get a bit too much, or like our hubris, like, sends us past way over our moral lines and whatnot. But yeah, that would be kind of the baseline for it. Mourn things that disappear or are over, by all means, but like, don't feast on self-pity like for too long, because that will be the end of you. But apart from that, two things. One is luck. Like I said before, just like things can be unlucky, and they can be unlucky for a long while, but it doesn't take much of a streak of good luck to really just turn things around. And I think the last one as well is like, like you, I've got a bit of a fear, I guess, about how our next decade is looking. And based off that, I've been doing a lot of reading through history and whatnot, of how people have gone through living through hard times, depressions, like world wars, stuff like that. And it always comes down to people, having people around you. Like, in normal times, day-to-day life, as I say, a good relationship, a healthy relationship is just like a game changer. Like, you hear it a lot growing up, and we tend to discount it. Like, and there's always that, phrase behind every great man is like, is his wife or is his girlfriend or partner or whatnot. There's, endless truth to that, more than we give it credit for. If you can keep your life on that sort of even keel, those fundamentals, like your friendships, your relationships, you've got a long way to go. And when things are really looking like kind of like they are now, where everyone spent the last week going, is gas going to run out? Is fuel going to run out? Are they actually going to be able to plant crops? Are we going to starve? After wandering around dazed for a few days, like my first impulse after that was just to talk to people, not to get the fear into them or anything like that, but just like talk to people and see how they feel, see what they're planning, and also just chat to the people around you. It's something I experienced when growing up. Like, your neighbors, everyone up and down the street, like. And then you get older, and in this new weird world, that's not so much the case. But I think, like, if you know your neighbours, if you can speak to them, if you know what everyone does, I think that puts you at a huge advantage when it comes to dealing with problems. And that's exactly how people dealt with problems before. Like, food's running out. Like, my brother runs a farm. Like, the gas has run out. Well, let's pull together and get something. Or, if we need to get some supplies, let's 5 of us get on our bikes and go get it. That sort of thing. And I think that's a bit of the world that's disappeared for a few decades that we'll probably see re-emerging. But if there's anyone sort of like going, how do I fix my existential crisis, or how do I fix the real crises coming down the pipe, I'd suggest that's the way to do it. Find your people, and we're on a metal podcast. That common link, like, I think goes a long way. Even something as just like as niche as that.
Well, there's 2 comments I want to make there. Firstly, with regards to a relationship, I mean, there is nothing that will fuck a man's life up worse than making the wrong decision about a woman. But equally, there's nothing that will see, and I speak from personal experience, there's nothing that will help you accelerate in life more rapidly than meeting the right person and making the right and making the right decision about the person that you allow into your life. I said this to Paige early on in our relationship. There is zero coincidence to me in the fact that my life accelerated professionally with the podcast in every possible way, including my relationship with my daughter. As soon as we were officially together, everything in my life just started to like scale up very, very rapidly. In ways that it had never done before, with all the other floozies that I kept company with. And then on the sorry, you were going to say something?
Oh no, it's funny because our girls are like, they're teens now, and we try and put good dating into their, dating concepts into their head, for all the good it'll do. I remember my parents doing the same and just not listening to them, much to, my downfall. But it is kind of funny that for something where whether you're a man or a woman, you make the wrong choice, and is the most consequential thing in your life. Like as a guy, that's everything you worked for gone. If you're a woman, well, that could be your life gone. Like the rate of domestic violence and murders that happen inside relationships in this country is like, it's rather off the hook. So there's such real consequences for if you fuck up this basic fundamental thing, dating the right person. But it's something that the teaching forward, like the information we pass on, is very informal. And my God, a lot of us just get our information from music, books, movies, and they're the fucking worst, man. Like they, love conquers all. No, it fucking doesn't.
Well, dude, I said that to Mike Hill, and I've mentioned it a few times again on the podcast. But people of your and my generation, in particular, men of your and my generation, we were done no favors by fucking rubbish like Say Anything. John Cusack standing there with a boombox over his head like some creep outside the woman's apartment. I mean, I will confess in my teenage years to deploying some very, very stupid movie-derived techniques, and
all of us,
fucking dumbest shit that I could possibly have done. But there is a layer deeper than that. It does instill in your mind a certain idea about, like you say, love conquers all. These principles about love that just simply are not true, and until you divorce yourself from them completely, you're never going to be in a healthy relationship.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like things like I remember, around, and it was probably around the time I joined Berserker or whatever. Like I was having an argument with a friend about it, and I was, about what makes a good relationship, and I was like, well, love, obviously, that's the first thing. Is, love conquers all. Blah blah blah. And he goes, no. He goes, you can be in love with someone and be utterly incompatible. And that smart fucker, he's retiring around about now, I think, up in Queensland, house with a pool and 3 lovely girls. But me, I only just worked that out, like what he was telling me in my 40s, which is like, it really helps to have attraction, but some fundamental things have to be compatible. Like some fundamental things have to work. And unfortunately, it's put to me like that. And what I never, as you said before, what I never realized is just the force multiplier it is across like your health, your career, like you as a person, just everything. It is when you're with the right person.
Yeah. I mean, I again, I can speak from experience. I nearly derailed my career completely for somebody who I was deeply in love with, hopelessly incompatible with. But for me, it was like just the idea of you have to be again, maybe it's just men of a certain mindset, but you have to be the man who wins her heart. You have to be the hero at the end of the story. And holy shit, it was a dark time in my life. I mean, it fucked an awful lot of things up. And a lot of work to get back from that as well.
Oh yeah. I had a relationship go in 2009. I swear it took me, almost a decade of work just to just to sort it out. You know, still dating and seeing people through it, but you know, not leaving a trail of happy people behind me. That's for sure. So yeah, like yeah. Oh God, I could really honestly go on about that for ages, but yeah, and I think that was also that it's kind of funny. There's a large part of my music career where it was probably driven by angst from like just going, why isn't life working out? Why isn't everything I read in movies, music, books, why isn't that all sort of like, why wasn't that correct? I'm doing this, why isn't that happening? And just like feeling hard done by, like, you know, like a lot of people I think still are these days, like, because the information seems to have only gotten worse in some ways, but yeah, just like feeling like the world owes you one. And that was between, you know, my careers that weren't working out and, you know, just one falling apart after the other, and ditto a lot of the relationships I was in. I was just kind of like going, fuck everything, you know, let's grind. But these days now everything's working, so the music, you know, I don't want to say it's coming from a better place, because, you know, Werewolves is definitely coming from something like yucky. But we're able to do a better job of working on it, because, you know, you're not losing days, weeks, months to just kind of like sitting there just like going
Well, I mean, the original intent behind this conversation was to celebrate the fact that, you know, you guys were, for the first time, you've been in the top 10, I think, with most of your records, but you were for the first time the #1 album on Into the Necrosphere's top 30 of 2025, the ugliest of all.
That's what it was called.
By far the best thing you guys have done as a band. I remember when Matt sent it to me for the first time, I was making notes as I was listening to each song, and I just, the thing that stuck with me was, if you take a song like Dog Knotted as an example, Dog Knotted had that like big moment with a chorus, like when you do the Dog Knotted, you know, you've got that little sort of melodic preamble behind it, and those were like always the moments that made every Werewolves album to me. And then the ugliest of all, that has 9 tracks where every single song has a moment like that, and it was like just by virtue of that alone, this album is probably, and I thought that when I heard the record the first time, this is probably going to be my favorite album of the year, and you know, it turned out to stand the test of time. I mean, I know it came out in September, but I'd heard it back in January, I think, so I lived with it for a long time. And
then you saw the band. Then you saw the band photo on it, and you were like, "This is definitely my favorite album."
Of course. I was like, yeah, this is definitely, you know, I was not swayed by the many other good releases that came out last year. But how do you feel about that record? You know, now that it's in the rear view, you guys have had a very positive response to it generally. No accolade as high, obviously, as being on the Into the Necrosphere top 30 of 2025. But how do you feel about it?
I must admit, I haven't listened to it for a while. I feel a little bit of terror when I listen to it, just because, as always, it's like, how the fuck do we beat that? But I also like just how, you know, I think we've always had that, you know, thick dollop of not giving a fuck when it comes to the music, the lyrics, the image, the whole thing. And I think like that dollop turned into an industrial vat full of it. That album around, which always tickles me. But things like with around the release were just such a mess. Again, you know, that for me, it's kind of like not ruined it. It's just sort of like gone, you know, kind of like Antichrist Imperium album 3. We've done another one where we fucking knocked it out of the park, but the shit behind the scenes is like, you know, gone wonky, so it didn't get like everyone listening to us and, you know, the accolades and everyone's sort of going, fuck yeah, this is amazing, that we've experienced with previous albums. And we know it's not because it's less interesting or less fun to listen to or anything like that. It's just shit happens. So so yeah, just the other thing as well is like, around the time that was being released, we were at work on Faustian album number 2. And one of the dangers of recording so many albums so quick is like, sometimes while releasing a good album, you make one even better, and you immediately forget about like the shit that you've just done. So right now we're really keen for the release of the second Faustian album, which is called The Parable of the Sewer. But like a few things, that's the limit of the information I can give about releases and whatnot.
I may or may not have heard it, and I can definitely attest to the fact that it is quite special.
Cool.
For anyone who liked the EP, I mean, I would say this is many leaps forward musically.
Thank you. Yeah, just the same way I think Werewolves, like when we did the first album and then, finding our feet and then put out What a Time to Be Alive, and it was just like, bang, a big jump. I think we've managed to do the same thing with Faustian as well. So we're kind of, we've been, we've recorded too many fucking albums. We're really excited, like, for that release. Can't wait for it. But at the moment, we're also currently recording Werewolves album number 7. And starting to sort of get a little bit excited about that too. So, I think we're kind of becoming victims of our own productivity at the moment. Anyone who's...
You have rolling blackouts in the country might slow down the recording a little bit.
I think we need it. We won't have blackouts. It will be similar to COVID, like where it's like, right, we can't go anywhere. And at which point, Matt and Dave will probably be like, "Oh well, fuck it, let's start another band and do another few albums."
Yeah.
But I'm sort of like, I'm working on Werewolves album number 7 at the moment, and I got to admit, it's a little bit of a struggle. I'm currently realizing just how many thousands of words of lyrics I've written in the last few years. And you're always trying not to repeat yourself or become too derivative, and always try and offer something a little bit different, like on each album, not rewriting the whole thing, but like just so it's not exactly the same as the previous album, despite everything we say in our publicity. So at the moment, it's hard work, but it's coming together, and it's immensely stupid. I can tell you the album titles and song titles off air. They're dumb as fuck.
You bring up an interesting point there. Robert Vigner said this to me about immolation as well. When you have that much music in your back catalog and you've done, you have put out so much content, it must be very, very difficult not to be. I mean, how does the process work for you in terms of referencing back to material to make sure that you're not repeating yourself?
I've been relying on my memory, just so far, but it's starting to get past the ability of my memory, and I'm 51 this year as well. So unfortunately, I'm starting to get teeny tiny little bit doddery. So. Yeah, it's I'm still kind of just at the very edge of being able to remember everything else I've done and make sure I'm just not regurgitating the same shit. But yeah, it is difficult. I don't have a process. I don't have a trick or a technique or anything like that. The only advice I have for people is just don't record more than 3 albums. If you have to do more than that, just start a different band.
I'm about to say wrap up every band after 3 records. Last thing I want to talk to you about. You guys played with Abath, and I have a couple of friends who saw you play, said you guys were awesome. I saw the stage photos, mate. You getting some guns. You saw some definition in those guns as well. But how was it playing with him? Did you get to meet him?
Yes. I love those guys. Like Abath, it's kind of like the opposite experience we have with Mayhem. So the bands themselves, they're pretty chill. Abath, the guy, he's an interesting cat. He is cool with us because we're another band. Here's a funny story. Is I think the first time I met him, I turned up to the Brisbane venue on the first day. I'm just kind of sitting there watching everyone set up, and he's walked past, and I've gone, "Hey, g'day." And he's like, and I was like, cool, yeah. And then, yeah, each day, you know, I saw him, you know, I'd be like, how you doing, man? And he'd be like, and the funny thing as well, when he does his on-stage banter, like between songs, he'd be like, oh
yeah, no, I heard that last year at Beyond the Gates.
Yeah, and people would just be like, yay! So anyway, it got to the last night, like of the tour in Melbourne, and I was just hanging out with the rest of his band backstage, and he was just getting his makeup off and changing and stuff, and then afterwards, he's walked into the room and walked up to me and said, "Thank you very much for the tour. I had a lovely time," and it was like, fuck, I understood that. And I didn't know whether or not, like, you know, the like was jet lag, or whether I was suddenly understanding Scando English a bit better. I don't know. But his band, they're crack ups. Like I had Ukri, the drummer, as well as Doug, like the keyboardist, stay over at the place. Stay over at my house, like after the tour. Like it finished for them in Adelaide at a huge festival here, Froth and Fury, like again this year, even bigger than normal. And yeah, after their show, I think they headlined, and so afterwards I'm hanging out and I'm like, well, what's the plans now? You guys going straight home? And Doug and Ukri are kind of like, we don't have any plans. And I was like, have you got somewhere to stay? And they're like, tonight, yes. And I was like, well, tomorrow? And they're like, yeah. I was like, do you need a place to stay? And they're like, oh, that would be good. So I had them over like for a few days, just like, you know, at the family home, and they're crack ups. They're good fun. Haven't laughed that hard, you know, in a week for a long time. Andre, the guitarist, I think he might play for Gorgoroth as well. I'm not entirely sure. I should have asked. But after their last show, his girlfriend flew out from Sweden, and I was like, what's your plans? And they're like, we've got a motorhome and we need to be in Sydney in 10 days. And I was like, cool. So where are you going? And they're like, we don't know. And I was like, far out. Like, you know, Australia's a big empty place, man. Like you kind of want to know where you're going.
I'm about to say, you don't want to be traveling to the center without some sort of guide, without some sort of plan.
So yeah, I quickly scrawled up some sort of like plan from Great Ocean Road, Wilson's Prom, South Coast, New South Wales, and I spoke to Aaron, who's their mixer, their Australian mixer for the tour, and he goes, yeah, I've let them know every campsite between here and Sydney. Last I saw, he got back to Sweden okay, so still alive. I imagine he's had an all right time. But they were great fun. It was great fun to watch the show. It was awesome seeing the Immortal set, particularly like getting absolutely nailed. And it was just also one of those rare treats as well that the band themselves are like great fun to hang out with. It's, you know, it's not always given. So that was really cool.
Awesome. So 2 albums for you this year, Faustian and Werewolves.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to surprise us with a December release of a new Senseless record or something like that?
I wish. Honestly, just it's hard enough just doing like you know, Werewolves at the moment. And I get the feeling like once this album's done, I'm very much looking forward to not writing a single lyric or having to learn a different bass line for like another 6 months or so. Having said that, I've still got to say,
unless inspiration strikes Matt sooner.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm going to have to refresh on a Berserker set, which you know, is the length of 2 Werewolf sets. But yeah, no, there's nothing else planned for this year. Senseless, you know, a lot of the motivation for that was always kind of like, well, I like making music, but I'm not in a band making music at the moment. And so all these ideas floating around in my head have nowhere to go. So now that, you know, I'm probably making too much music, like I don't have that same problem. I do have like, you know, an album worth of songs written, but the sitting down, finding a drummer, working out distro, like putting it to labels, you know, the recording of it, I quite enjoy, but just everything else associated with it just, it makes me want to, the thought of it makes me want to claw out my own eyeballs.
Well, dude, it is always a massive pleasure catching up with you. Thank you very much for this. Great talking. And it turned out to be a very different conversation to what I had anticipated. But if I find it compelling, I'm pretty confident the Legion are going to find it compelling too. So I will speak to you again very soon, brother.
All right. Thank you very much, man.
Take care.
Cheers.
A man who should require absolutely no introduction. You just listened to my conversation with Sam Bean from Werewolves. Conversation that I should add took a few twists and turns that I was not expecting. Sam and I have spoken about just about every topic under the sun in all the many times that he's been on this show. But one thing that we've not done is go as deep and meaningful as we ended up going. That seems to be a theme on some of the recent conversations I've had. And I certainly hope that it has landed positively with you all. The song you just heard, of course, Enshittification, that is by Werewolves, and it is taken from the Into the Necrosphere album of 2025, the ugliest of all, available on Back on Black Records. And as always,
The Werewolves Bandcamp link will be posted in the description to the podcast. So make sure that you avail yourself of it, and even more importantly, you let Matt, Sam, and David know who it was who sent you when you buy yourself some music or some merch. And again, like I said, massive thank you to Sam for being on the podcast. Right now, we are going to be sticking with Australia for the Unsanctioned Filth segment of the week, and from a man who requires no introduction to a band who requires none of the same, Sick has been featured on Into the Necrosphere many times. Matt Prizzo has now unleashed a brand new track under this banner off an EP entitled Sons of Pestilence. This is the song of the same name. Absolutely fucking sensational, so sit back and enjoy.
Belial came lost in a spirit's balloon, fell lost from heaven, or more cross to love. Why spirit itself to him guilt and busted, or after smoke, yet who more often than he.
Sons of Pestilence by Sick, your Unsanctioned Filth track of the week, featuring the mighty Matt Brizzo, who has made his presence felt on this podcast many times in various iterations. As always, the Sick Bandcamp will be in the description to the podcast, so head over there, buy yourself some music. I am told this is a taste of what is to come on the next full-length Sick release, and I will certainly look forward to that happening. If you're in an unsigned band yourself, a reminder that you can get in touch via the website intothenecrosphere.com, or you can hit me up on intothenecrosphere@gmail.com, or you can reach out to me on Instagram, Facebook, or X, and if I like what I hear, I will feature it on the show. I've got a couple in the hopper, one band that I will feature next week that I think you guys are going to dig. Also, remember that you can check out any of the bands that I have featured on the Unsanctioned Filth segment on intothenecrosphere.com. I host all of the bands that I have spotlighted on there. So if you're lucky enough to be in that privileged and chosen few, you'll see your logo up there as well for all to see until the end of time, or until the internet dies, or whatever comes first. A few other reminders very quickly, friends. The Horsemen of the Podcasting Apocalypse, the Cosa Nostra of podcasting, have your back from Monday to Sunday with the very highest in quality and free entertainment. We start on a Monday with Horrible 666, hosted by Brandon Legion. Tuesdays, there's yours truly with Into the Necrosphere. Next week, Steve Brogdon from Newcomb is my guest. That is going to be an abbreviated episode because in a couple of days' time, I am flying to South Africa to go and surprise my mom for her 75th birthday. So it is very unlikely that I'm going to have the chance to do a full weekly news rant and all the other jazz that normally goes with a full-size double XL episode of Into the Necrosphere. But still, I've got something for you because I don't let the Legion down. On a Wednesday, we have your first double shot. That's Everything Went Black, hosted by the great Mike Hill. We also have Iblis Manifestations. That is brought to you by my brother from another mother, Cheyenne, from the band Trivax. Mike Hill returns on a Thursday for Necromaniacs, one of the very best podcasts of the week. He's joined by Jeff Kashid and Mike Scondado for that one. And then we've got the Sinister Minister, Carl Hikara, with Soul Knox. That comes your way on a Thursday and on a Friday. I mentioned intothenecrosphere.com. Pretty much nothing else to mention other than this. If you're a grown man who uses the word yikes in an email or social media post or in any way, shape, or form, then it's time for you to pull up your adult diapers and hit the bricks, because this is my weekly news rant.
A roundabout for judgment. And hang them where the world can see.
Okay, friends, as always, we are going to kick off on metalstorm.net. For those of you that give a fuck, I landed back from Mumbai yesterday. Quite pleased to be home, although it was a good trip, all things considered. Went there for work, as I mentioned last week that I was going to do, and man, it is like no place that I have seen. I've been in over the last 20 years. I was working this out on the plane yesterday. I've been in about, I think, 18 countries in total. And I have never seen anything like Mumbai in my entire life. In many ways, it is kind of the way that they present Los Angeles in the movie Elysium, for those of you who saw that. It looks disturbingly similar. And I have been made to understand that the reason why it looks that way is because of just large-scale corruption. Apparently, the Mumbai municipality is one of the richest municipalities in all of India. I mean, they would have to be given all of the amount, all the money that's going into India. I mean, I was there for business, like I said, so I've got an idea of the amount of investment being made into India right now. And there is absolutely no excuse for the city's infrastructure being in the dilapidated state that it's in if you had competent leadership at the helm of things. But, all that being said, one thing I will say about India, exceptionally friendly people, great service for the most part, and very good food, which probably won't be a surprise to many to hear that. I mean, Indian food is fucking great anyway. Over there, it is exceptional. The one other thing I would add, though, is if anybody asked me to drive in India, I think I would choose the Bullet. It is the most fucking insane thing I have seen anywhere. Think about the worst traffic. for me, probably the worst traffic is, it would kind of be gridlocked Cape Town or gridlocked London. And that is like a fucking breeze by comparison. In Mumbai, everybody, all the cars, all the motorcycles, every single taxi, everything is just like piled up on top of each other. And the way that they drive there, they just don't give a fuck. There's not a single car that I saw that doesn't have multiple dents in it. And I hold my hats off to off to all of the cab drivers that took me everywhere when I was there, because I don't know how the hell they do it. I wouldn't be able to survive driving there. But I will be visiting India an awful lot over the next couple of months and potentially the next couple of years. So if there are India-based members of the Legion, probably my next visit is going to be Bangalore, and I would say that's likely to happen around September time. So if I can see if I can see a couple of you guys while I'm there, let's make it happen. Anyway, standing tall before the throne of judgment first this week is our first track, and it comes to us by way of Into the Necrosphere favorite, or I should say, Into the Necrosphere approved Reeking Aura. The new Reeking Aura album, they say, On the Promise of the Moon, is out next week. Another new track from it, Sifting for Fungal Inheritance, is out now, and it's available for streaming together with an official audio clip. This album is going to be released on Profound Law Records, which generally speaking is a good omen, notwithstanding the fact that, I was a big fan of that Reeking Aura debut, Blood and Bone Meal. So I have high expectations for this one. Let's hear what it sounds like. I'm going to pause there because the song is only 2 minutes 21, so we might end up listening to the whole thing if we carry on. Couple of things I want to say about this track. So firstly, last week I had that Funebrarum single that I played, and my criticism against that single, which many of you guys liked, and obviously that's fair enough, but my criticism against that single was that the vocals just seemed to lack punch. And even though it was super deep, super growly, there was just some muscle, much needed muscle lacking from it. Now, by comparison, Will Smith from Reeking Aura employs a very similar singing style, yet there is no lack of muscle there. I mean, that sounds aggressive, it sounds punchy, and it adds to the music, very importantly. So that's a tick in the box. I think even though the style of death metal on this track, and I don't know whether the rest of the album is like that, but the style of death metal on this track is a little less cavernous to what they had on Blood and Bone Meal. I actually think that it works really well for them. It's a bit more in your face, a bit more aggressive. There's a bit more of a crust punk influence to it. But actually, potentially a bit more of a old school Swedish death metal sound going on there. But the riff is catchy. That melodic bit that they have in the kind of latter half of the song, I think that's very creative. They're not a band, Reeking Aura, who are afraid of coloring outside the lines, and I think that works for them as well. The only complaint I would really have is not against the song itself. It's against this fucking audience that just looks like they're queuing up at the DMV and, you know, someone somewhere at the, where's Reeking Aura based? I think it's New Jersey. Yeah. Someone at the local DMV, you know, stumped to have a band play in around the area where people are lining up. I mean, just be a little, you know, show some more fucking enthusiasm, especially when they're recording this for a music video. But besides that, I think this carries away a top notch. This sounds really, really good. Like I said, it's out in a week, and April is just fucking stacked for great music. So I do hope people pay attention to this one, because you know, again, when you've got a month that is as absolutely rammed from beginning to end as April is, you know, has been thus far and will be until the very end of the month, a lot of bands tend to kind of go in under the radar, and you know, people will sleep on them. Don't sleep on Reeking Aura. That debut album, as I mentioned, was top tier, and all indications point to this sophomore effort being of a similar caliber. Okay, moving on to a band called Wandar. I would assume that's how I pronounce the name. It says here, black metal collective from Germany, Wandar, are set to release their 4th studio record, Tiefe Erde, on May the 1st. That comes out on Vendetta Records. Vendetta Records, of course, the label that released Ultha. And if you haven't checked out that episode with Ralph Schmidt that I did last week, make sure you do. Really, really good. I mean, the album, the Ultha album, A Light So Dim, is fucking magnificent. And Ralph, you know, given the fact that he is in the Horsemen of the Podcasting Apocalypse, it should come as no surprise that he also knows his way around a microphone, and he knows how to be an interviewee and keep the conversation really compelling. So it's it's not an episode that you should miss. But anyway, via the Bandcamp widget below, they say, yeah, you can stream the first new song in preview entitled Terug. So let's give it a whirl. I'm going to pause there. It's not bad, but it is not blowing me away. I wasn't familiar with this band before I heard this track. I can't say as how I am particularly compelled to want to hear the rest of their back catalog after having heard that song. It's the kind of track that would land incredibly well, I think, with people that are fans of bands like Fortress. as a matter of fact, I think if you like that last Fortress single, which I was not a particularly big fan of, you're probably going to like this song as well. It's well written. The melody is well deployed. It sounds reasonably unique in this for a band in this space, and the production is good, but it just lacks that severity that I need in black metal. When black metal doesn't have that, it needs to compensate for it with something else, like a darker atmosphere, or doing something a bit more interesting than what I'm hearing there. But for me, it's just forgettable. I think that's the problem. It's not something that I'm gonna, once I've done recording the news rant, I'm never gonna listen to the band or the song probably ever again. So yeah, that's sort of how I feel about it. I feel indifferent towards it. I don't think you should ever feel indifferent towards a band after you've heard it. Not the the best of the best bands, you never feel indifferent towards. So I'm not going to give it a thumbs down, because I think that's probably a little bit harsh, but it's not getting anything beyond that. Now, I had a couple of questions sent to me over the course of the week, 2 from Dizzle Van Haltren. I'll answer the first one, and then I will answer the next one later on in the news rant segment. He asks me first and foremost, who are your top 5 guitarists and drummers, and why? They can be from any genres. Let's start with guitarists. So, in no particular order, Trey Azagthoth from Morbid Angel, based on his not only incredible technical capability, but just his style and his signature is so extraordinarily unique. He's just a guy who can't. I don't think I don't think there's anybody that can imitate him. I saw I Am Morbid at Beyond the Gates last year, as I mentioned in my Beyond the Gates review, and the guys in the band are very technically extremely competent, but they just cannot replicate the way that he plays guitar. He's got an off-kilter way of timing everything that he does. He's got a groove that seems to exist in his head only, but completely makes sense when it comes out on his guitar. He's just fucking amazing. There's never been anybody like Trey, and I don't think that there ever will be anybody like Trey. And yes, he's eccentric and he's a strange dude, and certainly from a health perspective right now is going through some troubled times, probably both physical and mental health. But that doesn't take away from the fact that he's one of the greatest guitarists, if not the greatest guitarist in extreme music of all time. I don't think there can be any question about that. The level of innovation that he brought to Morbid Angel and the influence that he wields over bands in this scene, in the whether they play black metal, death metal, doesn't really matter what, is unparalleled. The guy is just fucking exceptional. So next up on that list, I'd say, is Dimebag Darrell. Dimebag, for the spontaneity and the unique groove that he has in the way that he plays. If you listen to any Pantera song or any Pantera live clip where Dime was playing, I should say, there's just something that's going on beneath the surface. Even when the riffs are simplistic, there's something that is in the way he delivers, in the way that he executes, the way that he plays every single note, that just sounds soulful, and it sounds authentic in a way that is it's very rare to find that. And again, that's why it doesn't matter who they replaced him with in the Pantera tribute act that's out on the road right now. Zakk Wylde is technically one of the best guitarists ever. It doesn't sound the same, and it never will, because there is only one Dime, and he's one of these dudes where it sounds like fucking lightning shoots out of his fingers, goes straight into the headstock of the guitar, and out comes whatever we end up hearing. For a similar reason, I should say, my number 3 favorite guitarist, Matt Pike from High on Fire, a guy who sounds like he doesn't rehearse. It sounds like he just picks up the guitar, starts playing, and out comes Brother in the Wind, or Rumors of War, or one of the countless incredible songs that High on Fire have written and recorded over the course of a illustrious career. He just sounds like music comes out of him. Nothing is predetermined, nothing is pre-rehearsed. He is the music. He's a fucking phenomenal guitarist. Number 4 on my list, I would say, is the mighty Matt Wilcock. again, for his creativity, his ability to write riff after riff after riff of fucking brilliance. And if you look at Werewolves, Faustian, the Antichrist Imperium, everything he's been involved in just seems to turn to gold. He is just a fucking phenomenal guitarist, and I know he's my friend, certainly a guy I consider a friend. But I always see it as, I mean, I divorce myself from that fact when I talk about his capability as a songwriter and as a guitarist, because I feel like I have to. It would be unfair of me to be biased just because I like the bloke personally. But at the same time, I also look at it as I am extremely fortunate to have such an incredibly talented friend. And I think he's one of the most talented guitarists on the face of the earth. For a fifth, who would I include there? Probably Chuck Schuldiner. And again, Chuck is a guy who's been immensely, influential. He's been immensely inspirational. And he's a guy that can wring so much emotion out of a track or out of a single note. You listen to some of the songs on, we can go over the entire fucking Death discography if you want and look through it. But even if we look at a track like, we go on The Sound of Perseverance and we listen to A Moment of Clarity, that part where he gets to the bit where he says, look to beyond what vision lets me see. There's like it's only a couple of notes that he's playing, but the way that he lets them ring out, the way that he lets each note linger, live in the space, and just pierce your heart as you're listening to that. And of course, as we know the backstory of him being very sick when that album was being done, that makes it so much more meaningful. But yes, he really is a phenomenal guitarist. Seeing him on stage on any live Death show, any live Death recording, it's again, I can't wrap my head around how he manages to do vocals and play guitar as technically as he does and pull it off so perfectly. So yeah, there you go. Those are my 5 favorite guitarists. I'll get to drummers after we listen to a few more songs. We're going to jump straight into this one. Exorcist reveal a new track with Aberrations album set to land in stores on April the 24th through Hammerheart Records. Swedish death metalers Exorcist have unveiled his Shrouded Gaze, the 3rd single from the oncoming music output. Exorcist comments on the track. This 3rd song stands as the final mark before Aberrations is fully unveiled. The track pulls you even deeper into the sorrow and darkness that is the core of the band itself. With his Shrouded Gaze, we let there be no light, no life, and no sun left to fawn. Exorcist is very distinctly the end result of growing up, I think, in the Swedish death metal scene. I mean, if you think about everyone from At the Gates to The Crown, Sacramentum, every single melodic death metal band to ever come out of Sweden, if that was all you spent your entire life listening to as a young man, this is probably what you'd end up producing as a musician. So, you know, it shouldn't surprise us to learn that these guys are from Sweden. They have 3 albums now, including Aberrations. Their first was Deadly Possession, that came out in 2022. At the Somber Steps to Serenity was their second album that came out in 2023. And then Aberrations now is their third record. The song itself is all right. I think that opening riff is pretty decent. I actually thought the song has potential when I heard that. It sounds not unique, but well executed, like the melody, like the general vibe of it. When the song itself then starts, again, it becomes pretty mundane to me. Very, very throwaway. There's nothing that's wrong per se. Like, it's, you know, well played, well performed, vocals sound decent. The drumming maybe a little bit less imaginative than I would enjoy, but it's certainly possible. And everything else, production, everything, you know, every element seems to be fully in place, and yet there's something missing that makes this memorable and makes you want to go back to it. And in this day and age, I just don't see how you can get away with releasing music like this to any other than a very, very small audience. I might be totally wrong in saying that, but I just think that the standards have increased to such a point, and the battle for people's attention has elevated to such a significant degree. I just don't see how a release like this is one that's going to stick with people, let alone the end of the year, stick with people until the end of May. So that's my view on that. So again, it's a pass from me. It's not a thumbs down. The song doesn't suck, but it's not something that I'm particularly excited about. So I was asked a really good question here by our friends in Obsidian Shrine. Have you ever heard something that sucked so bad during the news rant that it got cut? Like, fuck this, I'm not even exposing them any further. Not really, because even if I thought the song was absolute fucking dog shit, I would still not really cut anything out of the news rant. The whole point of the news rant is for it to be spontaneous. So it's very, very rare that I cut anything out. The only time that I tend to cut stuff out is if I suddenly had to clear my throat, or I sneezed, or I misspoke on something, or I just felt like I got 3-4 sentences into saying something about a band, or about some random topic. And I thought, okay, no, hang on, I need to redo that. I need to retake it. But for the most part, what you see with a news rant is, I mean, it's 99.3% live, and I don't cut stuff out, especially not when I hate the band, because let's be honest, some of that makes for some comedic gold. But I do have a tendency of avoiding bands where just they don't look like something I'm going to enjoy. So if I'm scrolling down and I see grown men dressed in cravats, or I see some band that looks like an Evanescence clone, I know I'm gonna think it's shit. So why bother listening to it? If I see a power metal band, 99% of the time I'll give that a miss, because again, why bother listening to it? I know I'm not going to like it, and I don't want to be, as much as I want to be honest and upfront with my likes and dislikes on the Weekly News Rant, I also don't want to just be dunking on bands for the sake of doing so. So there's probably some, not censorship, but some managing of what I look at that's a bit more intentional, rather than actually cutting stuff out of the news rant, if that makes sense. I'll tell you, just on a side note, as we talk about the look of certain bands and me not listening to them, I would love to get your guys' perspective on this, but I'm starting to develop a gutful of people in bands, women in bands, I should say specifically, that keep moaning about the fact that the band they're in is spoken of as a female band or as a female-fronted band. Because for me, it would seem that, as I mentioned before, the battle to maintain people's attention in this scene right now in 2026 is so fierce that if anybody is paying you any attention for whatever reason, whether you're a woman, whether you're a man, whether you are, from whatever walk of life, that is an opportunity. Grab hold of the opportunity and make the most of it. Stop fucking complaining about the fact that people recognize you as a woman. I think with most of the best bands that feature women, yes, sometimes that's a talking point, but does that necessarily draw people towards listening to the band, or does it push people away from the band? I mean, I think if you've got the chops, you got the chops. It doesn't matter where you're from. Now, I will admit, me personally, I think the mistake that a lot of female vocalists make is that they try too hard to sound like men. If I give you an example, I actually thought Alyssa from Arch Enemy was one of those women. I think that to a certain degree, Angela Gosso was one as well. She's a lovely lady by the looks of things, and on stage, I don't like the fact that she's smiling and kind of dancing around there. That's not very metal to me. But she at least seems to be very nice. But she tries too hard to sound like a man, and therefore I don't like that style of vocaling. And I hear that with a lot of bands. A lot of bands where there's a woman singing, they cup their vocals too much, they try and go too deep, and it just doesn't work naturally with their voice. They have feminine voices. It's for the exact same reason that it doesn't work naturally for me to try and sing falsetto like a woman. Now there are very, very major exceptions to that. Jaded Lungs from Adorior, I think her vocals are fucking amazing. Melissa Gray, for those that recognize her by that name. Belinda from Johnny the Boy. She's, of course, in Crippled Black Phoenix as well. She's fucking amazing. And again, you recognize the fact that they're women. I think in both their cases, actually part of the reason why they're effective is because they do extreme vocals as women. They don't try and sound like, they're not women trying to sound like men. But again, if you're talking about those bands, some people might say, yes, it's a female-fronted band, but beyond that, they don't give a shit because they like the fucking band. So I just think there's so many other things in the world to get upset about. But I mean, recently, I think Metal Sucks had an article about this. It was discussed on a panel at Inferno. It just seems to me to be complaining for the fucking sake of it. I might be wrong. Tell me if you think I'm full of shit, yeah. I'm not hating on women in metal or bands with female members. But that's never been an issue for me, as you all know. I mean, I have praised many women to the fucking hilt on this podcast. But I just think this moaning and groaning about being referred to as a female band, it's just dumb. Whatever it is about you that makes them pay attention, like I said, is a opportunity. Grab hold of the opportunity and make the absolute most of it. On to some more music. Abuser drop a brand new song called Painbringer in the wake of their forthcoming debut full-length release, Blood Marks. Polish thrashers Abuser have premiered a visualizer video for another new track and preview entitled Painbringer. I like that. I mean, it is basically Abuser taking on Vader at their own game, to the extent that I was trying to imagine what that track would sound like with Peter from Vader on vocals, and it would sound exactly like a Vader song, no question about that. But at the same time, it would also sound like one of the best Vader songs probably released since. I mean, we would have to go all the way back to Black to the Blind for there to be a Vader song I can think of that would, at least the riffing, that cool unhinged guitar solo, that would top what we just heard now. So yeah, pretty good. Thumbs up. I think the actual vocalist that they've got, maybe I shouldn't have made the comparison to Peter in my mind. I happen to be a big fan of Peter's vocals, so he doesn't compare as favorably. But for the most part, I do dig this. I think it sounds aggressive. It sounds very intentional. And like I said, that unhinged guitar solo, I fucking absolutely love. By the way, if you want to be, I don't know whether you're going to be as blown away by this as I am, but you know that Peter from Vader is fucking 60 years old. God damn, time is moving on, guys. I remember when I first got into Vader, and I think they were in their like early 30s. They were young men, and to think that and he's basically the age of I think my grandfather was 60 when I was. We actually wouldn't even have been 60 when I was born, because he was. I think there was. I can't remember the exact age difference, but I think he was like in his late 50s when I was born. So I mean, Peter from Vader, technically speaking, should now be a grandpa. Anyway, all right, let's move on. Before we do, let's get to the second part of Dizzle Van Haltren's question, and the other part of the question was my favorite drummers. So favorite drummers would be, let's think. Well, firstly, Steve Ashim from Deicide. I don't think there can be any question about that. Steve is the fucking man. If you listen to the first Deicide album, all he's playing on is pure hate, anger, and spite, and he sounds fucking fantastic for it, even though he makes a ton of mistakes on the album. It makes me love his performance on the album even more, quite frankly. So he is absolutely amazing and one of my favorite drummers of all time. Next up, I would say David Haley from Werewolves. Werewolves and fucking every other band in Australia. The Amenta, Psychroptic, Faustian, Abremelin. I mean, he's also, by the way, been in a bunch of bands that I don't think get the attention that they should get. And if we go down that list, I mean, firstly, I've spoken of them before. I actually spoke of them to David when he was on the podcast, but Ruins, what a band. If you've not listened to their 2016 album Undercurrent, I suggest that you do so post haste. Consummation, another absolutely fucking killer project that he was part of. They put out an album in 2019 called The Great Solar Hunter. Fucking masterful. But yeah, he's just a drummer that is like, there's drummers that can play fast, there's drummers that can play technical, and then there's drummers that can do all of those things but make every single thing that they do mean something. And he is the perfect example of that. Everything that he does means something, whether it's a fill, whether it's a roll, whatever it is. He's also got how important this is to me, he's got a natural sense of groove that you hear in, especially this latest Werewolves record. So yeah, he's just a dude that can do fucking everything under the sun. And then knowing people that have worked with him, and people that will tell me how good he is when you actually see the man in action in studio, can be no question that he needs to make that list. Also on that list would be Pete Sandoval, the Commando. Love him for his uniqueness, love him for his style. Much like Trey, just one of the most recognizable and influential drummers ever in the history of extreme music and death metal. I would also add to that Vinnie Paul. Vinnie Paul and Dimebag, I've spoken about their chemistry already. Nothing like it. If you go back to Far Beyond Driven or A Vulgar Display of Power, I don't give a fuck if you turn your little nose up at Pantera and you think they're shit. I defy you to point me to a drummer that has a more unique way of playing than Vinny, has a more natural sense of timing and rhythm than Vinny, and plays together so well with the guitarist in the band. That was a chemistry that will never be replicated. Never. and he was at the center of it. And then another one that rounds out my list that potentially may surprise some of you, won't surprise those who have listened to the podcast for a lengthy period of time, but Johnny Kelly is on my list as well. Johnny Kelly from Typo Negative. He's a drummer that makes every band he performs with sound better because he's there. Danzig is a great example of that. I saw Danzig live probably 6 times in like the last 30 years. And I've seen Danzig play with, I'm trying to think who the drummers were that he played with. He had the drummer who was in the band when they did Danzig 7, and that was the first tour that I saw him on. It was when they were touring for Luciferi. And for that show, I think he actually still had Joey Castillo in the band for that. Yeah, it was, because it was 2002 that I saw him play. And Joey is a fucking great drummer, sounded very good. He also had, he had a couple of other drummers playing with him, but he never sounded as good live. And the Danzig show was never as good live as it was with Johnny Kelly behind the drum kit. He kind of speeds up all the songs a little bit, but again, he just for some reason his presence just tightens up and makes everything sound so much more lively. Like, you go back and you listen to, I remember it really struck me how much he was adding to the band. One of the times that I saw Danzig, they did the track Unspeakable off 666 Satan's Child, and it was at the London Kentish Town Forum, and I just remember it sounding so fucking cool. There was like a looseness to it, but at the same time it sounded so much more aggressive, and just everything else in the band was just working. Danzig's voice sounded fucking amazing. The guitar sounded awesome. So yeah, Johnny Kelly, what a fucking man. And then another one of my favorite drummers, and this is based off the fact that I've seen him play live, and every time I've seen him live, he has just been exceptional, and that is Igor Cavalera. What a man's man that dude is. So yeah, there you go. Those are my lists of favorite guitarists and drummers. If you want to know what I think of favorite bassist and vocalist, feel free to ask me on intothenecrosphere.com. Fleshcrawl are detailing their upcoming studio record. It says here, experienced death metalers Fleshcrawl have disclosed details and a first single in connection with their new album announcement dubbed Epitome of Carnage. It will be set free on June the 12th, 2026, recorded at Scum Light Studio in Memmingen, Germany. And then again, usual fucking list of credits that you typically get from metalstorm.net. Let's just zip it and hear what the song sounds like. That is not good. I don't know how the fuck they got signed to Reigning Phoenix Music. The only reason that they could have been signed to that label is because they've been in the game for a long time. But I mean, off the back of that track, I can't imagine the rest of the album sounding anything other than mid tier. The vocals are fucking awful. They sound strained. They sound completely and utterly lifeless. The drums are not good. The production on the drums sounds fucking horrible. And for all the reasons I was talking earlier about my favorite drummers, and how I like the creativity in the way they play, I like the variation, I like the fact that they will constantly throw in rolls, fills, things that mean something and that make a genuine difference to the song. That could be program drumming just as easily. It's not, but it could be program drumming, and you wouldn't know the difference because it sounds monotone and boring. And then the actual riff of the song fucking sucks. It sounds like something that Dismember would have written on any of the first albums in Indecent and Obscene, and they said, wow, this is something we can fuck around with in the studio, but it's not really good enough for the record. It's not good enough for me to ever want to listen to ever again either. That is for goddamn sure. Hate it. Absolutely hate it. Now, there was a question asked, actually, which ties into this in a roundabout way. This was also one from Dizzle Van Holtren. He asked me, what black and death metal albums do I revisit the most? So, Akrakoka, Corazon, album I listen to on a very regular basis. No surprise there. What else? Dismember, Indecent and Obscene, and Like an Everflowing Stream. Dear Side. That's a record that I would listen to at least once a week. Morbid Angel, Blessed Are the Sick. Also a record that it's required listening on a frequent basis. What other black metal stuff do I revisit? I mean, there's so much. Dark Throne, Hate Them. That's an album I go back to a shitload. In the Nightside Eclipse by Emperor, another record that to me is so exceptionally important, and I listen to it a lot. Those are the main ones that come to mind. But yeah, I go back and I listen to an awful lot of older stuff. Like I said, I can't see myself ever going back and listening to Flesh Crawl, not that single, nor anything else in their back catalog ever, especially not after what I just heard there. But I will say this, if you are in the market for some new releases, the stuff I was digging that came out this past Friday, Newcomb, The Grave Remains, fucking fantastic. Make sure you check out that interview with Steve from Newcomb that's going to be on next week's episode of Into the Necrosphere. Immolation, Descent, one of the best death metal albums of the year. No fucking debate about that. It is not only one of the best death metal albums of the year, it is one of the best death metal albums ever, and it is one of the, not ever, but one of the best albums that Immolation has ever made. Uada, Interwoven. I really, really love the whole vibe and tone of the record. I love the fact that they've reworked all these Uada songs into neo-folk songs, and the reason why it is a successful record is because if a record can take me from being a detractor, and I've been a vocal detractor of Uada on this very news rant, could take me from being a detractor to somebody who now considers myself a Uada fan, you know they must be doing something right. Doodsvanger, Within the Flesh, fucking brilliant. By the way, reached out to the PR company handling the Doodsvanger record and said, would any of the guys like to be on Into the Necrosphere? And the answer was no, they don't believe in doing interviews. So don't ask me to get them on the show. I've already done it. And the answer was negative. Melakesh, Sentinels of Shamash. That EP is one I've been looking forward to for a while. I actually had heard it several months before it was released, but I'm still glad it's out. And if you haven't listened to it yet, then fucking change that. And I think that's about it. It was a very, very, very busy weekend. And I had a bunch of you guys send me some stuff I need to listen to as well. I haven't gotten around to all of those yet. Oh, actually, here's another one. Scaphos, The Descent. Fucking phenomenal. That was one that was high up on the list of anticipated records when we heard the last single on the news rant, maybe 3-4 episodes ago. And I can tell you now, the rest of the album does not disappoint at all. Okay, moving on to some music again. Cognizance, the Zone single streaming. 3 weeks prior to the release of their next long player, In Light No Shape, the UK's Cognizance now stream a music video for another new song in preview called The Zone.
Promise of
That is fucking excellent. And not only is it excellent, but it is from a subgenre of music that I have been very harsh on the News Rant over the years. I'm not the biggest fan of technical melodic death metal, as most of you know, but these guys just do it right. And I can go top to bottom on every single element that makes up that track, and it ticks the box for me every single time. Alex, I don't know, Bailey, I think is his surname. His vocals are superb. Apparently, he took over lead vocals from the in the band in 2023. Sounds fucking magnificent. David Diepold, the drummer, is fantastic. Exactly the things that I hated about that Flesh Crawl song, he just does perfectly. Nails it. Doesn't sound boring. Doesn't sound monotonous. Sounds like he's fitting into the music. Sounds like the music is built around his rhythms rather than the fucking drums just being an afterthought. Yeah, he is superb. You can hear that bass by Chris Binns in the undercurrent of the song, superb, and then the guitars, fucking excellent. The way they've deployed melody sounds unique. It sounds interesting. So this just works on every level. I think this gets a top notch. Really, really good. Cognizance is not a band I've paid a huge amount of attention to in the past. I am going to change that. And the reason I'm so impressed is because this is, as I said, a style of music that is not necessarily my favorite or what I typically gravitate towards. They have managed to convince a naysayer. If they can convince me, they can probably convince you. So put that on your list of albums to look forward to in the next couple of weeks. Behemoth released a Bathory cover. Speaking of bands that I don't like, Behemoth have released a new cover of the Bathory song, The Return of Darkness and Evil. The track was recorded as the official anthem for this year's Mystical Festival in Poland. Now, again, I shouldn't say I don't like Behemoth, because there are Behemoth albums that I like very much. Those albums being certainly the earlier stuff. I love Telema 6, Soskia Cultus, Demigod, The Apostasy, Evangelion. It's from the Satanist onwards that it wasn't really cutting the mustard for me anymore. But how fucking cool is it that Mystic Festival have their very own song? And what a song to have as your anthem. So that I'm very down with. Let's hear what the track sounds like. Top notch. much, and it is the best thing that Behemoth have released since At the Left Hand of God. Behemoth frontman Nurgle had the following to say there right here: "The Return of Darkness and Evil by Bathory has always been a particularly important song for me. Last season, I got to collaborate with Bloodfire Death, a tribute project for the Swedish legend. I then asked Eric Danielson from Watain, who was singing this song during the project's concerts, if he wouldn't mind sharing at least one verse so that I could also sing it. Seeing his reaction, I immediately understood he has a strong connection with the song as I do, and he wasn't about to share it with anyone." When Mikhail Wadzala suggested that Behemoth create the anthem for Mystic Festival, I was game immediately. Fucking brilliant idea. More festivals should do that. I had only one condition, that it won't be an original song but a cover. The Return of Darkness and Evil has everything that's needed: an anthem-like character, fantastic groove, great lyrics, and I completely identify with, and an extremely catchy chorus. I came to the conclusion that it is the perfect song to embody the festival's atmosphere and become its musical manifestation. I like fucking everything about it. I like the cover. I think they do a superb job of it. You can hear there's a connection between that track and Nurgle. He sounds fucking cool on the song. I mean, put aside all my personal views on some of the dumb shit that he has said and done, but he sounds absolutely superb there. And as I said, I just love the idea of. I mean, I shouldn't be making as big of a fuss about it potentially, but I just love the idea of having an actual song as your anthem for the year or for a particular iteration of a festival. I'm just looking at the Mystic Festival website as well. There's a fucking serious lineup this year. Obviously, you'll have Behemoth on there. Megadeth is on there. You've got Down, Mastodon, Electric Wizard. What else? Corrosion of Conformity, Decapitated, Static X, Scour, Marduk, Rotten Christ, Forbidden. Yeah, there's plenty of reasons to go there. I've never been, but I don't know. Maybe I might have to change that at some point in the next couple of years. Okay, I think we're going to do two more songs, and then it's Swirly time. The first one, absolutely essential for us to do. At the Gates deliver a new single. The Dissonant Void is the second preview tune from the At the Gates full-length opus, The Ghost of a Future Dead. It has premiered online in the form of an official music video directed by Costin Quarano. I love it. Much like the first single, I think it is superb. It blends everything about the very best of At the Gates in my mind. I like that clean guitar that goes into the the pre-chorus, but anyway, the use of the clean guitar works very, very well. I think that Thomas sounds fantastic, as you'd expect, and just overall, I think the song just works. A lot of people, and I wasn't one of those people, but a lot of people really hated how experimental The Nightmare of Being was. For me, I think it was a brave decision to take, and I liked the way that record turned out. But this is definitely way more aligned to At War with Reality, to Drink from the Night itself. And that's not a bad thing. And I think whether or not this is the end of At the Gates, I would be surprised if they continue without Thomas. But if this truly is the end, then what a way to send off an absolute fucking, not only a legend in Thomas, but a band that will be legendary until the end of time. There will be, I mean, there will never be another band like At the Gates, and their influence is, I mean, if not on a par with, then certainly a nose hair away from being on a par with or on the same level as the great masters, as Deicide, as Morbid Angel, etc. So that gets a top notch from me. I don't think there should be any question about that. And the closer we draw to hearing that record in its entirety, the more excited I'm getting. All right, last one, and then it is time for the Swirly of the Week. 6 Feet Under debut a brand new track. It's called Mutilated Corpse in the Woods. 6 Feet Under have launched an official video for Mutilated Corpse in the Woods, the newest single off their forthcoming studio album, Next to Die. Check it out. I'm going to stop there. I'm about to do something that might be slightly unfair, but for anyone who might have forgotten how fucking cool 6 Feet Under used to be, listen to the next 60 seconds and then compare what you will have heard to what we just listened to with Mutilated Corpse in the Woods.
Makes my skin warm and wet. You can feel your heart beating. Scream is listening. Uncut your tongue from your mouth. Dying, you feel yourself slip away. Your dead body will be left unburied. No one will find you. All is quiet as I force my fist down your control. Cramming tendons and veins. Until your insides out. Through your lipless mouth. Your stiff
I rest my case. Way better vocals, way better songwriting, cooler lyrics, everything better. If I ever wanted to listen to 6 Feet Under, why in a million years would I listen to this new 6 Feet Under record when I can go back and I can listen to Haunted? Haunted was a perfect 6 Feet Under record, and as much as the newer material is an improvement over that previous abomination that they released, I mean, that is also a little bit like saying eating fucking 45-day stale McDonald's burgers is better than eating dog shit. It's like neither is something that I wish to do. So I'm afraid I'm glad to hear that Chris is sounding a little bit better, but the riff is so fucking lazy. And the song itself just sounds so gormless and uninspired. I really do think people are getting. I think they're hearing Chris sound not like a child trying to mock death metal or trying to mock Chris Barnes, and they're getting very excited about that. And I think that excitement is very misplaced. It's not as bad as Nightmares of the Decomposed or Killing for Revenge. Yes, this is true. But fuck me, this band has done way better stuff than what we just listened to with Mutilated Corpse in the Woods. Now, Chris Barnes was a man who fell foul of the hand-wringing types in the PMRC back in the 1990s. These days, we don't deal with the PMRC, but we do deal with a contingent of commie flag waving bedwetters, and they are the subject of my Swirly of the Week. Friends, in an effort to ensure that only the most deserving and gullible riffraff are made to stand tall and face the porcelain bowl of reckoning every week, I recently uncovered what may well be the mother lode of mental atrophy, moral posturing, and just outright pathetic, pants-wetting puritanism in the black metal scene. It arrives in the form of a PDF circulated via some obscure German website I had never previously heard about, and it catalogs what appears to be tens, if not hundreds of bands, according to their, quote, sketch level. Bands are graded on a sliding scale: safe, mild sketch, moderate sketch, major sketch, and finally, Nazi. The latter, reserved for the most egregious offenders, which won't surprise you to learn include Impaled Nazarene, Drudka, Goat Moon, and others of their ilk. Meanwhile, the safe column is populated by the usual suspects. Dawn Raid, of course, earn their gold star thanks to their bona fide communist credentials, while their comrades in Death Heaven are deemed similarly inoffensive, despite, as the author of the document points out, them admitting to having at some point listened to Burzum. The real comedy, though, or the tragedy, depending on your tolerance for this sort of thing, lies everywhere in between those two poles. Misteaming, for example, are labeled mild sketch because vocalist DG, who has been a guest on Into the Necrosphere, once complained about feminist, vegan, no borders, and SJW crowds ruining black metal. Dimmu Borgir earned the thoroughly unenviable distinction of moderate sketch for the heinous crimes of releasing their debut album on No Colors Records and, brace yourself, once featuring Mayhem's Hellhammer on drums. Galsveerd, meanwhile, are flagged as sketch because Gal used the term subhumans in an interview, although the author is quick to reassure us that this predates his coming out, and apparently coming out functions as some sort of moral reset button. Alongside the standard issue, guilt by association, and the blanket condemnation of anyone who's ever voted for a politician that doesn't sit comfortably on the far left or isn't immediately to the left hand of Stalin, the PDF also delivers a masterclass in logical gymnastics. Dissection, for example, are branded major sketch off the back of John Notwhite's murder conviction, and yet murder, it seems, is small potatoes compared to Nightbringer, who included a Julius Evola sample on one track. Of course, we've had Nas on the podcast talking about this. But just for the sample alone, Nightbringer are considered worse than Dissection, and they get the label of Nazi. Watain are labeled moderate sketch because a member, and this is allegedly because there's zero evidence of this, although I'm sure it's not untrue, but a member of the band allegedly wore an offensive T-shirt on stage, and any band who has brushed shoulders with Horner is also immediately fast-tracked to Nazi status. So Behexen, for example, and basically anybody who's been in the same dressing room within a 48-hour period as Horner, they're instantly Nazis. I could go on, but you get the picture. Whoever compiled this document has clearly spent hours assembling a dossier built largely on half-remembered anecdotes, what they read on Reddit, hearsay, etc. Some of it is just outright fabrication. And of course, yes, it is true that there are a couple of people who have either said unsavory things in the black metal scene or potentially in their personal lives have acted in a way that is unsavory. But what to me makes this especially hilarious is that the same people who consider themselves extreme and transgressive and rebellious suddenly morph into the fucking HR department the moment that something offends their sensibilities, their communist sensibilities. They're so terrified of anything that clashes with their insane ideological worldview that, like the Christian right of the PMRC, they are compelled to provide you with a sanitized shopping list of quote-unquote safe bands, as if black metal was some sort of corporate environment in need of compliance guidelines. All of that ensures that this week, both the author of this drivel, as well as every single idiot who takes this kind of garbage seriously, is immediately sentenced to a kangaroo wedgie and a triple dunk down the toilet bowl of justice. And that, my friends, is your Swirly of the week. Of course, that brings us to the end of episode 313 of Into the Necrosphere. Remember, I am back next week with Steve Brogden from Newcomb. It is going to be a shorter episode because in 4 days' time, I'm going to be in a jet plane flying to South Africa to surprise my mom for her 75th birthday. So next week is going to be Steve Brogden from Newcomb. That was a very fun interview, so make sure you don't miss it. The week after, it's going to be something from the archives. So I'll think of what that could be. And then we will be back to business as usual in 2 weeks' time from now. So, I mean, you basically get next week what for others would be considered a full podcast. It's just not considered a full podcast for Into the Necrosphere. And hopefully that means something to you. If it doesn't, well, suck it. Anyway, friends, thank you very much for listening to the very end of the podcast. Thank you for spending the last 2.5, 3 hours with me. I really appreciate it. I wish every single one of you a great week, and whatever it is that you are doing and wherever it is that you are, stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you bad motherfuckers again next week.